The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Its walls were covered with the flags of 12 ancient species, each one older than human civilization by thousands of years. Admiral Jack Cortez had walked through these halls many times before, but today felt different. Today, something in the air told him that everything was about to change. He stood at the back of the observation gallery, watching as Ambassador Diana Marsh took her place at the speaking platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes, but Jack had seen her face down warlords and pirates without flinching. Today, however, even she looked tired. This was their 47th attempt to gain a permanent seat on the council. 47 times asking, 47 times being told to wait. The Velrani High Speaker, a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, called the session to order. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. We gather today to consider the petition of the human species for permanent membership on the Galactic Council. Let the record show their service to this body. A holographic display appeared, showing 3 centuries of human history with the Council. Jack watched images flash by. Human ships rushing to defend Velrani colonies during the border wars. Human doctors working day and night during the Moreki plague. Human engineers rebuilding the Thessan power grid after the Great Storm. Human soldiers holding the line at Kareth Station, while Council ships retreated to safety. 300 years of service. 300 years of sacrifice. 300 years of being told they were valued partners. The Kethri ambassador rose to speak. He was an insect-like being with compound eyes and clicking mandibles. The humans have indeed been useful to this council, he said. His translator made his voice sound flat and cold. But usefulness is not the same as wisdom. They are a young species. Emotional. Unpredictable. They have served well as helpers, but leadership requires maturity they have not yet demonstrated. Jack felt his hands curl into fists. Beside him, Captain Ben Holloway muttered something under his breath. One by one, the other species spoke. The Thessan representative praised human bravery but questioned their judgment. The Moreki delegate thanked humans for their medical assistance but suggested they needed several more centuries to develop proper civilization. The Velrani High Speaker concluded by saying that humans were valued friends of the Council, but not yet ready for the responsibilities of full membership. The vote was unanimous. 12 species, 12 rejections. Diana Marsh stood silent for a long moment. Jack could see her shoulders rise and fall as she took a deep breath. When she spoke, her voice was steady. I thank the Council for its consideration. Humanity accepts your judgment. That was all. No argument, no anger, no dramatic speech. She simply bowed her head slightly and walked out of the chamber. Jack and Ben followed her. They did not speak until they reached their shuttle. Once inside, Diana sat down heavily and closed her eyes. Get me a secure channel to Earth, she said quietly. Priority 1. Jack watched her compose the message. It contained only 3 words. They refused again. The response came within hours. Not from politicians or diplomats, but from ordinary people. Messages flooded in from every corner of human space. Factory workers and farmers. Teachers and soldiers. Scientists and artists. The message was the same everywhere. Enough. We have given enough. Within a week, the Global Senate held an emergency session. The debate lasted only 4 hours. The decision was nearly unanimous. Humanity would withdraw from all Council operations. Not with anger or threats. Not with dramatic announcements or demands for apology. They would simply leave, quietly, peacefully, completely. Admiral Jack Cortez was placed in charge of the withdrawal. He began with the military assets. Human ships guarding Council trade routes were recalled. Defense stations along the frontier were powered down and abandoned. The crews came home without ceremony, packing their belongings and leaving their posts exactly as they had found them. Then came the civilians. Human doctors working in Council hospitals said goodbye to their patients and boarded transport ships. Engineers maintaining power plants and water systems trained their replacements and departed. Teachers, merchants, diplomats, and aid workers all received the same orders. Come home. Your service is no longer required. The council noticed, of course. Messages arrived demanding explanations. The Velrani High Speaker expressed concern about the sudden departure of human technical experts. The Kethri ambassador complained that human military withdrawal left several systems vulnerable to pirate attacks. The Thessan trade minister worried about disruptions to shipping schedules. Diana Marsh responded to each message with the same polite words. Humanity thanks the Council for 3 centuries of partnership. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Our borders remain open for trade and travel. But our people will no longer serve in Council operations. We accept your judgment that we are not ready for full participation in galactic affairs. Therefore, we will focus on our own development until such time as we have achieved the maturity you require. The council members read these messages and shrugged. Humans were being dramatic, they decided. Emotional, as always. They would calm down eventually. They would realize they needed the council more than the council needed them. In a few months, perhaps a year, everything would return to normal. They had no idea how wrong they were. Jack Cortez stood on the observation deck of the last human ship to leave council space. Behind him, the great space station of Thessan Prime glittered with lights. Ahead lay the darkness between stars, and beyond that, home. Ben Holloway joined him at the window. Think they'll miss us? He asked. Jack shook his head slowly. Not yet. But they will. He turned away from the window. They definitely will. The ship jumped to faster than light speed, and the lights of Thessan Prime disappeared into the void. The withdrawal was complete. Humanity had not slammed any doors. They had not shouted or threatened or demanded revenge. They had simply walked away, leaving behind 3 centuries of service and sacrifice. And in the great halls of the Galactic Council, the 12 ancient species continued their meetings, confident that nothing important had changed. The humans would return. They always did. But not this time. This time, humanity was done asking permission to exist. This time, they were going to build something of their own. And when the galaxy finally realized what it had lost, it would already be too late. 5 years passed quietly. On Earth and across human colonies, life continued without much thought about the Council. Factories produced goods for human markets. Ships explored new regions of space that the Council had never claimed. Scientists made discoveries they no longer had to share. Children grew up without ever meeting an alien species. But in Council space, things were starting to go wrong. Counselor Verath of the Kethri was the first to truly understand. He arrived at Border Station 7, expecting the usual quick passage into human territory. His ship needed repairs, and everyone knew that human engineers were the best in the galaxy. He had used human mechanics many times before. They were always happy to help. The young officer who greeted him was polite but firm. His name tag read Lieutenant Sam Briggs. He was barely old enough to shave, but he spoke with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. I apologize, Counselor, but human space is currently closed to non-citizen visitors, Sam said. If you require emergency assistance, we can provide basic repairs at this station. Otherwise, we can seize one side. I must ask you to return to Council space. Verath stared at the young human. Surely this was some kind of joke. I am a member of the Galactic Council, he said, his translator adding an edge of irritation to his voice. I demand to speak with your superior. Sam nodded politely. Of course, sir. One moment. He pressed a button on his console. A moment later, a woman's face appeared on the screen. She was older, with short brown hair and tired eyes. Commander Price, the counselor wishes to speak with you. Commander Lisa Price studied Verath with an expression that might have been amusement. Counselor, Lieutenant Briggs has explained our current policy correctly. Human space is closed to general visitors. If you have an emergency, we will help. Otherwise, I suggest you try the Thessan repair yards. I hear they're quite adequate. Verath felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had heard rumors, of course. Stories of human ships refusing to answer distress calls, reports of human experts declining to renew their contracts with council employers. But he had assumed these were exaggerations, temporary problems that would soon be resolved. Now, looking at the calm faces of these humans, he began to understand. This was not a tantrum. This was not a negotiating tactic. This was real. He turned his ship around and limped back toward council space, his mind racing with worry. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. The Velrani discovered that their agricultural domes, which fed billions of their people, depended on atmospheric processors designed by human engineers. When the processors began to fail, they sent requests for replacement parts. The requests went unanswered. They sent technicians to study the machines, hoping to build their own replacements. The technology was beyond their understanding. It would take decades to reverse engineer. And they did not have decades. They had months, perhaps years, before the domes began to fail completely. The Thesan banking networks, the backbone of galactic commerce, had been built on human quantum encryption. The encryption was supposed to be unbreakable. What no one had considered was what would happen when the humans who maintained it stopped coming to work. Small glitches appeared first. Transactions that took seconds now took hours. Then, days. Then some transactions stopped going through at all. The galactic economy began to shake. The Moreki had always been proud of their medical technology. They had cured diseases that other species could not even diagnose. But when a new plague appeared on their outer colonies, they discovered an uncomfortable truth. Their best doctors had been trained by humans. Their most effective medicines had been developed in human laboratories. Without access to human medical databases and research, they were fighting blind. The plague spread. Ambassador Kate Sullivan, who had replaced Diana Marsh as humanity's Secretary of External Affairs, received delegation after delegation. They came from every corner of council space. Some came with demands, insisting that humans had an obligation to help. Some came with offers, promising trade deals and diplomatic favors. Some came with threats, suggesting that the council might be forced to take action if humans continued their isolation. Kate treated them all the same. She welcomed them politely, listened to their concerns carefully, and then explained humanity's position in simple terms. "We served the council faithfully for 3 centuries," she told the Velrani trade minister. "We asked for nothing except recognition as equals. That recognition was denied. We have accepted your judgment and withdrawn from council affairs. What happens in council space is no longer our concern." The trade minister's silver face flushed with anger. "You owe us your assistance. We depend on your technology." Kate smiled sadly. "Yes, you do. Perhaps you should have considered that before telling us we weren't good enough to sit at your table." The Kethri ambassador tried a different approach. He spoke of shared history and mutual benefit. He reminded Kate of all the times humans and Kethri had worked together successfully. He suggested that perhaps there had been misunderstandings that could be cleared up with proper communication. Kate nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your kind words, Ambassador. But I remember your exact words at our last petition hearing. You called us useful servants, but unfit for leadership." Those words were heard by every human in the galaxy. "We are not interested in being useful servants anymore." The ambassador left with nothing. Months passed. The council held emergency meetings. They debated and argued and pointed fingers at each other. Some blamed the humans for being too sensitive. Others blamed themselves for taking human assistance for granted. A few suggested military action, forcing humans to resume their support. These suggestions were quickly dismissed. Everyone remembered who had actually won the wars they had fought together. In the end, the council did nothing. They told themselves that humans would eventually return. They always had before. Humans were helpful by nature. They could not resist coming back to save the day. But on Earth, Kate Sullivan looked out her office window at a sky full of human ships, human stations, human dreams. She thought about all the times her people had rushed to help others without being asked. All the times they had been thanked with words, but dismissed with actions. Never again, she thought. Never again. The silence between human space and council space grew deeper, and in that silence, old problems returned, and new disasters were born. The first warning came from a mining colony on the edge of known space, a single message, barely 10 seconds long, filled with screaming and static, then nothing. The colony went silent. The council sent a patrol ship to investigate. It never returned. They sent a squadron. Only one ship made it back, its hull torn open, and its crew dead at their stations. The ship's recorder told the story that survivors could not. The Devourer swarm had returned. 400 years ago, the swarm had nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Trillions of insect-like creatures, each one no bigger than a human hand, moving through space in massive clouds that blocked out the stars. They ate everything. Metal, plastic, flesh. Entire planets stripped bare in days. Entire species wiped out in weeks. The Council's official history said that the 12 elder species had united to defeat the swarm. They had developed new weapons and brilliant tactics. They had saved civilization through their wisdom and courage. The truth was simpler. Humans had saved them all. Human admirals had commanded the combined fleet. Human scientists had created the weapons that could destroy swarm hives. Human soldiers had held the line at Kareth Station for 9 days, fighting and dying so that evacuation ships could escape. 70 million humans had given their lives in that war. When it was over, the Council had thanked humanity politely and then written them out of the history books. Now the swarm was back. And the humans were gone. Admiral Greg Patterson watched the battle reports from Outpost Sentinel, humanity's furthest monitoring station. The station was hidden in a dead system, invisible to Council sensors, watching everything that happened in the space between civilizations. On the screens before him, the Velrani Grand Fleet formed a beautiful pattern of lights. 500 warships, each one the size of a small moon. The pride of the Velrani military. Undefeated in 1,000 years of warfare, they moved toward the swarm cloud with confidence, their weapons charging for a devastating first strike. The battle lasted 11 hours. Greg watched without expression as Velrani ships exploded one by one. Their weapons were powerful, yes. They killed millions of swarm creatures with every shot. But there were billions more. Trillions. The creatures swarmed over the ships like ants over a dead animal. They found every crack, every gap, every weakness. They crawled inside and ate the crews alive. By the time the last Velrani ship went dark, the swarm had barely slowed down. The Kethri were next. Their armada was smaller than the Velrani fleet, but faster and more nimble. They tried different tactics, staying at range and using hit-and-run attacks. They destroyed thousands of swarm clusters without losing a single ship. Then the swarm adapted. It always adapted. The creatures began to predict Kethri movements, herding the ships into traps. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Kethri armada existed only in memory. The Thessan defense grid was supposed to be impenetrable, a network of automated weapons platforms surrounding their home system, capable of destroying any fleet that approached. The platforms had been built by human engineers, but the Thessan were confident they understood the technology well enough to operate it themselves. They were wrong. The defense grid lasted 3 days, not because the swarm overwhelmed it, but because the Thessan could not maintain it. Systems failed. Power plants overheated. Targeting computers crashed and refused to restart. One by one, the platforms went dark, and the swarm poured through the gaps. Commander Laura Chen stood beside Admiral Patterson, watching the destruction. She was young, barely 30, but her eyes were old. "Sir," she said quietly, "we could help. Our fleets are stronger than they've ever been. Our weapons would be effective against the swarm." Greg nodded slowly. He knew she was right. 20 years of isolation had been good for humanity. Without the burden of propping up council species, they had focused on themselves. Their technology had advanced rapidly. Their military had grown strong. They could enter this war and probably win it, but at what cost? How many human lives for species that had called them servants? How many human ships for governments that had denied them basic respect? Pass the word to all fleet commanders, Greg said finally. Defensive positions only. We protect our borders. Nothing else. Laura hesitated. Sir, billions will die. Billions of aliens who spent 3 centuries treating us like useful animals. Greg's voice was hard, but his eyes were sad. I don't want them to die, Commander. I really don't. But I also don't want to send our people into battle for species that wouldn't lift a finger to help us. Not again. Never again. On Earth, Secretary Kate Sullivan addressed the Global Senate. She laid out the situation clearly. The swarm was returning. Council forces were being destroyed. Without intervention, most of Council space would be consumed within 2 years. Humanity could intervene. The capability was there. The question was whether they should. The debate was shorter than anyone expected. Senator Tony Vega spoke for many when he said, "For 300 years, we begged them to see us as equals. For 300 years, they refused. We owe them nothing. Our duty is to our own people, our own worlds, our own future." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would defend its borders and nothing more. At Outpost Sentinel, Admiral Patterson watched as swarm clouds spread across the star maps like a growing shadow. Systems fell, populations fled. The great and ancient council began to crumble, and humanity watched in silence, safe behind borders that no swarm could cross, protected by weapons that no swarm could defeat. It was not revenge. It was not cruelty. It was simply the natural result of centuries of disrespect. Humanity had offered partnership and been rejected. Now they offered nothing at all. The screams of dying worlds echoed across the void. But in human space, the silence remained unbroken. The ship that arrived at humanity's border was barely holding together. Its hull was covered with scars from swarm attacks. Its engines flickered and sparked with each moment. Its life support systems were failing. Inside were the last surviving representatives of 8 council species, packed together in a vessel designed for a crew of 50. Captain Nicole Hayes of the Border Patrol vessel Ironclad watched the ship limp toward her position. Her sensors told her everything she needed to know. 327 life forms aboard, many injured, many dying, many already dead and not yet processed. "Orders, Captain?" asked her first officer, a stocky man named Danny Wolf. Nicole thought for a long moment. Her orders were clear. No council ships in human space. No exceptions. But there were also older orders, older traditions, written into the heart of every human who had ever sailed the stars. You do not turn away the desperate. You do not ignore the dying. Bring them aboard, she said finally. Medical teams to the shuttle bay. Security on standby, but weapons down. They're not enemies. They're refugees. The council survivors stumbled off their broken ship like ghosts. Their fine robes were torn and stained. Their proud bearing was replaced by the shuffle of the defeated. Some could not walk and had to be carried. Others simply sat down on the deck and wept. Nicole recognized one face among the crowd, Counselor Vereth of the Kethri. She had read about him in reports. He was the one who had called humans useful servants at the last petition hearing. The insult had been broadcast across human space. Every human alive knew his words. Now he stood before her, his compound eyes dull with exhaustion and grief. His translator crackled weakly as he spoke. "Captain, thank you. Thank you for your mercy." Nicole nodded stiffly. "You'll receive medical attention and food. That's basic decency. I couldn't call myself human if I denied you that." Hope flickered in Varath's eyes. "Then you'll help us? You'll send ships? Your fleets could turn the tide. We know you have weapons that can destroy the swarm. Please, Captain. Save what remains of our civilization." Nicole did not answer immediately. She looked past Varath at the ragged survivors being tended by human medics. Velrani with missing limbs. Thesson covered in burns, Moreki children crying for parents who would never come. These were not the proud council members who had looked down on humanity for centuries. These were the broken remnants of species that had lost everything. "Come with me, counselor," she said quietly. "We need to talk." She led him to an observation deck overlooking the stars. Through the window, they could see the faint glow of human defense stations. A line of lights stretching across the darkness. Beyond that line, safety. Before it, death. 5 centuries ago, Nicole began. The Moreki plague threatened to wipe out half the galaxy. Who answered? Varath's voice was barely a whisper. Humans. Human doctors traveled to infected worlds knowing they would probably die. Human scientists worked without sleep to find a cure. Human ships carried medicine to colonies that other species had abandoned. Nicole's voice was calm, almost gentle. When the plague was over, the council thanked us for our assistance and suggested we focus on less important tasks in the future. Varath said nothing. When the Thesson Civil War spread to 17 systems, who brokered the peace? Humans. Our diplomats spent 3 years in war zones, dodging bombs and assassins, building trust between factions that had been killing each other for generations. Nicole turned to face Varath. When the peace treaty was signed, the council praised Thesson wisdom and cooperation. No human name appeared in the official history. Varath's legs trembled. He sat down slowly on a bench, no longer able to stand. When the first swarm came, who held the line at Kareth Station for 9 days while your evacuation ships escaped? Humans. Something like tears fell from Varath's compound eyes. His species did not cry the way humans did. But grief has a way of expressing itself regardless of biology. 70 million humans died in that war. Your history books say the Council's combined forces defeated the swarm through superior tactics and technology. Nicole's voice finally showed some emotion. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. You erased our sacrifice. You took our victory and made it your own. We were wrong. Varath's translator made his voice sound like breaking glass. We see that now. Please, Captain. We are begging you. Help us. Nicole looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but firm. You're safe here at the border. We won't let the swarm reach you. Our automated defenses are already pushing them back in several sectors. Within a year, maybe 2, the advance will stop completely. She paused. But that's all we can offer. Your worlds, your council, your empire, that had no room for us, that's not our concern anymore. But our people should have been your concern when you had the power to help yourselves. Should have been your concern when you were spending resources on political games instead of defense. Should have been your concern when you were laughing at our petition for equality. Nicole stood up. I'm sorry, counselor. I really am. I don't enjoy watching people suffer. But I also remember what it felt like to be told, again and again, that my species wasn't good enough, that we were useful tools but not worthy partners. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. You'll be safe. Your survivors will be cared for. When the swarm threat is finally contained, we'll help you rebuild. But not as servants. Not as junior partners. Not as useful helpers grateful for whatever scraps of respect you throw us. Her eyes met his. Next time, if there is a next time, it will be as equals, or not at all. She left Varath alone with the stars and his memories. In the shuttle bay below, human medics continued their work, treating wounds and saving lives without asking about species or status. Children of fallen empires slept on human cots, wrapped in human blankets, dreaming of homes that no longer existed. And on the bridge of the ironclad, Captain Nicole Hayes wrote her report to command. 327 survivors received and processed. Border secure. No further action required. She did not mention the tears she had to wipe away before she could see her screen clearly. 20 years had passed since the swarm returned. The galaxy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible a generation ago. The great council chambers on Thesson Prime were empty now, their halls filled only with dust and memories. The 12 elder species no longer called themselves the rulers of civilized space. Most of them barely had enough population left to call themselves species at all. They survived in refugee stations along human borders, dependent on human power generators, human water recyclers, human food synthesizers. The swarm had not been defeated. That would have required a war of extinction that humanity was not willing to fight. Instead, the creatures had been contained. Massive automated defense networks, designed by human engineers and built by human factories, surrounded the infected sectors like a wall of fire. Any swarm creature that approached the barrier was destroyed instantly. Over time, without new resources to consume, the swarm clusters began to shrink. They were still out there, still dangerous, but no longer an immediate threat. Secretary Kate Sullivan was 73 years old now. Her hair was white, and her steps were slower than they used to be. But her mind remained as sharp as ever. She had spent the last 2 decades managing the most delicate relationship in galactic history, providing enough support to prevent complete extinction, but not so much that old patterns of dependence would return. Today she was meeting with representatives of something called the Remnant Coalition. This was the name that the surviving council species had chosen for themselves. It was a humble name, acknowledging what they had become without pretending otherwise. The delegation arrived at the human diplomatic station aboard a ship that had been a gift from Earth. Their own shipyards were still decades away from rebuilding. They wore simple clothes instead of ceremonial robes. They walked with heads that were neither bowed in shame nor raised in pride, but level, looking at their hosts as something that had taken them a long time to learn to see. Fellow beings. The Velrani speaker was young. She had been born in a refugee camp, raised on human emergency rations, educated in schools that mixed human and alien children together. Her name was Serena, and she spoke human standard with barely any accent at all. Secretary Sullivan, she began. We come before you, not with demands or bargains. We come with something our ancestors never offered your people. An apology. Kate nodded but said nothing. She had heard apologies before. Words were easy. Actions were what mattered, Serena continued. The old council treated humanity as servants, as tools to be used and discarded, as children who would never grow up. This was wrong. Not just strategically wrong, but morally wrong. We denied your people the dignity that every thinking being deserves. We took your sacrifices and erased them from memory. We asked for help with one hand while pushing you away with the other. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring back the billions who died because of our arrogance. We cannot restore the worlds that burned while we debated politics. All we can do is ask, not demand, if there is a path forward, together, as equals. Kate studied the young Velrani for a long moment. Behind Serena stood representatives of the other surviving species. Kethri, Thesson, Moreki, others, all watching, all waiting. In the back of the room, Commander Amy Patterson observed the scene silently. She was Admiral Greg Patterson's granddaughter, now serving as the military liaison to the diplomatic corps. She had grown up hearing stories about the old council, about their dismissive words and thoughtless cruelty. But she had also grown up in a galaxy where human and alien children played together in refugee camps, where human nurses delivered alien babies, where the lines between species had begun to blur in ways her grandfather never expected. Kate looked at Amy and raised an eyebrow. The commander understood the unspoken question. My grandfather used to say that humanity's greatest strength was never our ships or our weapons, Amy said, stepping forward. It was our capacity to forgive. But he also said that forgiveness is not automatic. It must be earned. She faced the alien delegation directly. Show us you have changed. Not with words. We have heard enough words over the centuries. Show us with actions. Work beside us as partners. Respect our boundaries as we respect yours. Teach your children that humans are not servants or tools, but fellow travelers in the darkness between stars. Serena nodded. This is fair. How long must we prove ourselves? Amy smiled slightly. How long did you expect us to wait for a seat at your table? 3 centuries? 4? We waited that long, and you still said no. She shrugged. So you wait, however long it takes, until trust is rebuilt, until old wounds heal, until no one remembers why we were ever divided in the first place. It was not the answer the Remnant Coalition wanted, but it was the answer they expected, and it was more than they had any right to ask for. The negotiations continued for weeks. Treaties were drafted and signed. Trade agreements were established. Joint projects were proposed. The first of these was a research station on the edge of former Council space, staffed equally by human and alien scientists. Its mission was to study the contained swarm sectors and ensure they never threatened civilization again. On the day the station opened, Kate Sullivan stood on its observation deck, looking out at the stars. Beside her was Admiral Greg Patterson, now retired but still sharp enough to attend important ceremonies. He was 94 years old and had lived long enough to see the galaxy transform completely. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" Kate asked him quietly. Greg shook his head slowly. "When I gave the order to stay behind our borders, I thought we might be watching the end of everything. Them, and maybe us too. Eventually. And now? Now." He smiled, wrinkles deepening around his eyes. "Now I think maybe we did the right thing after all. Not because we won. Not because we proved we were stronger, but because we showed them something they never understood about us." Kate raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "That we're not saints, we're not servants. We're not here to save everyone just because we can." His voice grew soft. "We're just people, flawed and proud and stubborn as hell. We give respect to those who respect us. We help those who help us. And when we're treated like dirt, we remember." Through the observation window, a mixed crew of humans and aliens worked together on the station's outer hull. They laughed at shared jokes, argued about technical problems, and generally behaved like colleagues instead of former enemies. "My granddaughter thinks we could have saved more lives if we'd intervened earlier," Greg admitted. "She might be right. But I think if we'd rushed in like heroes, they would have learned nothing. They would have thanked us politely and gone right back to treating us like useful servants. And now they'll never forget. Their children will grow up knowing that humanity chose to let them suffer. And they'll have to ask themselves why." He turned away from the window. "That's not revenge, Kate. That's just the truth. Actions have consequences, even for ancient civilizations, even for galactic councils." Kate nodded slowly. She thought about all the lives lost, all the worlds burned, all the suffering that might have been prevented. She thought about the centuries of insults, the ignored petitions, the erasure of human sacrifice from official histories. Had humanity done the right thing? She honestly did not know. Perhaps historians would debate that question for centuries to come, but one thing was certain. Humanity had withdrawn quietly and returned on their own terms. They had faced the galaxy not as beggars asking for scraps, but as equals demanding respect. And finally, after all this time, they had gotten it. That would have to be enough.